cricket.
And some in tennis.
They're about that big, and sometimes they're about that big. Or sometimes they're that big.
Black, brown, and some of them have got very white teeth and they've got pig's noses things.
Some have long ears, they fly around at night, they fly in circles, they like to live in dark, damp places. They
live in caves and sleep upside down.
They eat fruit, worms, berries and nuts.
Fruit and
Insects.
blood.
They eat insects.
Moths. And they live upside down in caves. Yeah.
And they live on trees.
And they fly about at night because they're nocturnal.
July 1988 was not only a disaster for holidaymakers in Britain, it also held dire consequences for the country's bat population. July is the month that baby bats are born, and their mothers need to catch around 1,000 insects a night to feed themselves and their offspring. In July 88, with the rain and wind washing and blowing the insects away, many bats became desperate for food, and instead of looking outdoors for their meals, they started to look inside houses and came face to face with confused homeowners. Bill Champkin is one of the few people in Bedford who are licensed and qualified to handle bats. The job of this small group of volunteer bat workers is to help injured and feed hungry bats. It is also to reassure and inform the public and those people who find bats inside their homes. Mr. Webster, a retired policeman, was one man who had to balance his love for wildlife with the need to stop hungry bats that had found their way into his house.
Yeah, well, this is the problem. I think they actually live in here. And in the evening, they come out and fly around in the house. That's the problem. You can see there's one there now, and there's another one in here. Well, the other night, about a week ago, I think, I came in late into the hall, and there was one of them. He was hopping down the stairs. He wasn't even flying like this. So I picked him up, put him outside. I then went in the living room, down there, and switched television on. Another one came creeping along the floor. They sort of hop along the floor. I think they're young ones. So I picked him up, I dropped a piece of towel and pick him up, put him outside, go back, and there's two more flying round and round. Flop them down with a towel, put them out, settle again to television, and I see one crawling along the curtain. Take him down, out, back, television again. Another one crawling along the curtain. I thought, well, damn this, I'll have a look, see what there's at the back. There was two more at the back, so I think there was 3 or 4 in the curtain.
Bill explained what was happening.
Unfortunately, it seems a problem this year. We've had lots of calls with bats in
Really?
houses. The young have been abandoned mainly by their mothers because of the poor food. There's very little insects
Really?
around, and they're coming inside the house instead of going outside the house searching for food.
There's a couple on the floor here, look.
Yeah, that's the reason.
They've been
young bats
eaten
that,
by
yeah,
ants and
are
whatnot.
starving, and they've got no strength to fly. So
Ah, that's it.
they're pipistrelles. So
Yeah, I thought they were.
our commonest bats, although
they're
they're in very severe decline, as in years like this. The bats, you know, are breeding. They have one young a year. They breed. They're losing nearly all their young. So every year the bats are declining. Actually, the bats have declined by about 40% in 10 years of the numbers there were.
Do you mean they only have one young a year?
One young a year, and bats don't breed till they're about 3 to 4 years old anyway. So,
Well, you surprise me because I mean, I've had all that number. There must be lots of pairs then.
Well, there's not actually pairs. They're all female bats.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no male bats at all. The male bats abandon the females in the
Yeah,
spring.
yeah.
And then the females go to nursery roosts. They perhaps have 3 or 4 in one area that they move about in. They'll have their young in them, and then they'll rear them in them. They'll carry them for a couple of days, and then they'll leave the babies behind, and they'll leave 2 or 3
I've
adults
seen
with
that.
them.
I've seen a baby on the back of one of them, yeah.
Yeah.
But you think wherever they are in the house, there might be quite a number of females then?
Well, you can have anywhere between 10 and 300.
Yeah.
We've known of bat colonies of 300.
Yeah.
Thankfully, there weren't 300 in Mr. Webster's ventilation system. Nevertheless, he kept his kitchen boarded up from the inside for the rest of the summer. Bill found a pipistrelle bat to show Mr. Webster.
Right, can you see, that's him with his wings open. You can actually see how small his wings are to my hand.
Yeah, of course.
And it's actually a hand
Yeah,
stretched
quite.
open. You can see the fingers,
The fingers,
all the fingers and the thumb actually fly on their hands.
Yeah.
Bats don't actually catch the insects in their mouth. They catch them either in the wing membrane or the tail membrane.
Do they?
And they bat them towards the tail membrane, and then they transfer them to their mouth.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, that's...
Also, bats haven't got teeth at the front. The teeth are missing. If you look at him closely, you see he hasn't got any front teeth.
What, will he not have... He will grow them, will he?
No, they're missing for a reason, because he's sending his ultrasonics through his mouth. So it makes it so the teeth don't get in the way of the ultrasonics that are being sent out.
So if I put my finger there, he won't bite me?
No, he's very small anyway.
Thankfully, Mr. Webster had no fear of bats, and nor had Bill's next stop, at a farm where Miriam Ritchie had spotted several bats in her barn. In the barn lived a couple of owls, the bat's only natural predator, but Bill was nevertheless able to tell by the torn moth's wings he found by the roof that there lived in the barn long-eared bats, the second most common British bat behind the pipistrelle. Before showing Mrs. Ritchie a bat he was nursing and how to detect a bat, Bill Champkin set about tackling a few bat myths.
Yes, and blind as a bat, of course, that's stupid, isn't it?
Yes,
They're not blind,
that's
are they?
a total misconception. Bats can actually see very well. We now know that their eyes are designed to see in very, very low light conditions. They can see a lot better than us. And if you look at a bat and think of the size of its eyes to ours, you'll realise that they have got really quite large eyes. I've brought a bat along for you to see. We keep them in...
What kind is it?
It's a pipistrelle. We keep them in propagators at home. I'll just put this down on the floor.
Oh.
I'll try and get him out so you can see him.
And is this your tame one?
This is one of my injured bats that I'm looking after.
Can it fly away?
Well, it can fly, yes, but I don't think it'll fly yet.
How long have you had it?
About 4 weeks now, about a month.
Oh, yes, look at it. It's
Yeah.
swinging at me. Oh, look, it's wonderful. Now that you've shown me this as a pipistrelle, I would agree that the bat I saw seemed bigger than that
Yes,
one.
yes, the long-eared
Yes.
bats are much larger than this.
It seemed
They've got
longer.
longer ears that stick up.
Yes, it was a bigger animal climbing up that wall
Yes.
there. But the wonderful fur.
Yeah.
Oh.
They're-
Is it easy to look after them, injured ones? I mean,
Some bats are easy to look after. It depends what their injuries are. If they're very injured, then it's more of a problem. This has got an injury with its wing, but it can still fly a little bit.
could I look after an injured one, for instance?
Well, it's actually illegal to keep bats. You have to have a licence.
Even if it was an injured one?
Well, you can keep them till you can find somebody that is a
licensed.
registered bat
yes.
worker.
So, you were going to tell me how many times a night you woke to feed it.
Well, the young bats, we have to, in the beginning, when they're very young, a week old, we have to feed them every 1.5 to 2 hours. Then after about a week, every 3 hours. And then eventually we then wean them on to solids, and they're fed about every 5 hours then.
It's really just as bad as a baby. Well,
That's
worse,
right.
because you don't feed babies as often as 1.5 hours. And that is lovely.
No, that's another big misconception. Bats, if you think about it seriously, if you walk across a grass field, you disturb insects in the grass, and the actual insects fly up and fly around your head. The bat can see the insects with its sonar, but of course we can't, so it just flies round to pick the insects up that you're disturbing. This is a bat detector. There are various sorts. There's 3 different sorts on the market. This is like a converted transistor radio, and it works in the same way as a transistor radio, except it hasn't got an aerial. It's got a microphone, and you tune it, instead of tuning it to radio stations, you tune it to different frequencies. Then when the bat makes a sound, you can actually...
the bat, yes, I can see its mouth open and synchronised.
And then it makes a sound on the bat detector.
Oh, wonderful.
But when bats are flying, you get clicking sounds.
Yes.
So they're very useful. They're like your eye in the dark.
Yes.
It's on
So,
the
for
move
instance, if you were sitting doing a bat watch in the barn, you could... Am I allowed to have it on my
Yes,
hand?
if you'd like to pick him up.
Oh, I don't actually know how you pick bats
Just put your
up.
hand underneath him.
Underneath him?
Yeah, no, just get hold of him.
Like this?
Yeah. So.
Oh,
You hear the sound he's making now?
Yes, yes, he's lovely. How do we know it's a he? Can you tell the sexes
Yes, they
apart?
can be sexed.
In the same way as other animals?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, they're very easy to tell if they're male or female.
And look, it's noticed me, hasn't it?
Yep.
And how many babies? It's only one usually, is it? And occasionally twins? I don't know.
Yes, in this country it's very rare for a bat to have twins. Other countries it's quite common, but here usually only one. It's very, very rarely that 2 born.
And they hibernate?
That's right, they hibernate
All
for
of
about
them?
all of the British bats do because the insects disappear.
Yes, quite. There's little tiny feet.
Yep.
But,
How can anyone be frightened of that?
I know. It's like a mouse, really.
Yeah, mouse with wings. Actually, they're more closely related to us than they are to mice.
Yes, I can see that because the shape is more. It's got arms and fingers and. I can feel that sound going through my fingers now.
Bats can bite, and they've got very, very small teeth. The very small bats, there's no way they can bite you. They've got such tiny mouths, they can never penetrate our skin. But some of the larger bats, they live solely on beetles and large moths.
Yes.
So, of course, they need large teeth to crunch into the bodies of the insects. So, obviously, if you catch a bat, it's like any other animal. It'll bite you because it's frightened of you to begin with.
Yes.
But it doesn't bite you because it wants to. It's not very often that you come in contact with a very large bat. But that is the reason why it will bite you, because a bat is frightened like any other animal.
Of course.
Like a dog.